I've been looking at your website for the last couple of weeks, and I've read some of the experiences people had with the supernatural. I've had several experiences in my life. The first one that I can really remember is when my grandmother died. I was 16 years old and lived most of my life with my grandma. The night she passed away from cancer, I was devastated since I never got to say goodbye to her. But the night she passed, she came back to say goodbye to me. I remember being in that state between awake and asleep. I remember her coming to my bed, sitting beside me, and telling me she was perfectly fine and so happy to be with my grandpa. I told her I loved her, and she left. The second thing that happened was about 2 months after I had my third child. We moved into a beautiful home in Northwest Ohio. It had been totally remodeled, except for one room upstairs, in which we made into a toy room for the kids. My daughter, who was 2 at the time, was in that room playing when she started screaming for me. I ran up the stairs to see what was wrong with her, and she was in a corner with her hands protecting her head and screaming for the bad man to go away. I did not see a man. I picked her up and headed back downstairs, and when I was on the 3rd or 4th step down, I felt as if someone was behind me and very angry with me. Needless to say, I ran the rest of the way down. Also in that home, I was in the kitchen washing my son's bottles, and directly behind the sink was our stove. I'd placed my son in the carrier by the stove. My daughters had brought in their stuffed animals that my mother had gotten them for Easter and laid them down beside the stove. Now, these stuffed animals were the kind that make noise, as in the duck quacked, the pig oinked, and the cow mooed. I know my son was just a little bit too young to be able to reach over his carrier and play with the toys, let alone make them talk. While I was washing his bottles, the duck started in. I thought nothing of it. I thought maybe it was just malfunctioning. But then the cow started in, and a few seconds after that, the pig. I turned around, and my son was just all smiles. Needless to say, I hightailed it out of the home. I always hated to go into the basement of that house. It just felt wrong for me to be down there. But one afternoon, I had no choice but to go down. I had to take a bag of old clothing down to be stored. I thought I would just leave them on the floor, right at the bottom of the steps. So I leaned down to retie the bag, and as soon as I look up, I saw 2 little girls standing right in front of me. They were not my little girls. They looked about 7 and 5 years old, and let me tell you, I didn't waste any time getting up these stairs. They did not make me feel very safe. I did some research on the home and found that the house was built in the mid-1800s. A man and his family lived in the home, and he had 2 daughters. The man owed some money to a loan shark, and when he couldn't repay his debt, the loan shark killed the 2 daughters and buried them in the basement. My family and I didn't stay long in that house. The longer we stayed, the more evil it seemed to be. The most recent experience has been for the last 2.5 years. My father passed away, and I've had a very hard time dealing with his passing. I was made to make all of his decisions when it came to taking him off of life support. I felt, and still feel guilty for letting him go. I know that my dad comes to visit me, and I hope he never stops visiting. I don't let anyone smoke in my home, and my dad hated it. He hated to go outside in the garage. He was always on my case about it. Well, now that Dad has passed away, there are many nights and even days that you can smell cigarette smoke so plainly, like it's right next to you. I know it's my dad, and I tell him to take it to the garage, and he does. I know that he's looking out for me and my family. I just wish he would show himself to me just one more time. Thank you so much for your website. It's a comfort knowing that I'm not alone, and definitely not crazy. This story involves my aunt and uncle, and took place in the late 70s and early 80s. My aunt and uncle, and then baby cousin lived in a nice modest house in Upland, California, a very nice little city near Panola in Ontario. The niceness of the house didn't last long, and almost immediately, my family began experiencing weird things. Every night on the way to bed, my uncle would latch close the door to the spare bedroom across the hall from he and my aunt's master bedroom. Every morning, as he passed the same door, it would discreetly unlatch and push itself open on its own. This same room once locked in my uncle's sister, with her and my uncle both frantically turning and pushing and pulling on the door as things flew out of the closet at her. All at once, everything stopped, and they both jumped back to have the door unlatch and push itself open, as it always did. Needless to say, my uncle's sister didn't stay much longer in the bedroom, let alone the home. When my aunt would leave the home to run errands in the daytime, she would return to find all the pictures from the wall on the ground, not knocked over, but propped against the wall, directly under the nail it was once hanging on. This would happen nearly every time the house was left empty, no matter how many times they would put the items back on the wall. Another nightly struggle is the pounding up and down the walls, like someone banging their fist across the center of the wall, back and forth, back and forth. My own grandma, as well as my mom and dad, witnessed this and hightailed it out of there ASAP. One day in the summer, my cousin, who was about 2 or 3, was sitting in a high chair next to a long hallway. My aunt was just outside the back door. My cousin asked, "Mommy, who's that man in the hallway?" My aunt, not quite listening, asked back somewhat distracted, "What man?" My cousin proceeded to explain that the man looked like her Uncle Mike, who lived out of state. When my family had finally decided that enough was enough, they decided to sell the home and move to Kalamazoo, just outside of Yucapeka, California. On one of their last nights in the home, it seemed as if everything was going crazy. The pounding was out of control. There were loud bangs and unusual noises everywhere, and their dog was at the front door, its hair on end, and growling out the front porch. My aunt and uncle looked outside to the wraparound driveway and saw their van rocking back and forth as if people were inside jumping around. Within seconds, everything had stopped. Once my family had moved out, they eventually learned that their house was built over an old Indian burial ground. I've tried to ask my aunt more about this story, but she'll rarely talk about it, and I think is subconsciously trying to block it out. My aunt and uncle are very straight-laced and don't make up these sort of things, and I think that if my other family members had not been there to witness a lot of them, I would not even know about these occurrences in Upland. I've had to rely on my mom retelling me what she remembers, my aunt telling her as it was happening. There are probably many more things that went on that I would love to find out. I still don't even know the address of this old home, to see if the place still exists. As for the significance of Uncle Mike, my cousin's Uncle Mike had long, black flowing hair with darkly tanned skin and often wore a leather band across his forehead. Think 70s rocker fashion, looking somewhat like an Indian perhaps. This happened quite recently. Well, a few weeks ago actually. Apart from what I think are a few cases of what I think are more likely sleep paralysis with resulting hallucinations, this is the only experience I felt that was truly, well, weird. A bit of background first. I live alone and rent an apartment in a newly built block, one of 3, of low-rise units. These were built on the grounds of an old public primary school, which is over 100 plus years old. The far end of the strip of where the school used to be is preserved, and still has the school hall, a beautiful sandstone building, and is used for public functions. My particular block is built where the playgrounds etc. used to be. I know this as I grew up in the area, and remember the school when I was a teenager, though I did not go there, and remember what it used to look like beforehand. I'm personally unaware of any hauntings in the area, nor am I unaware of the history of the site, as I've not researched it. There is a fairly modern funeral based directly across the road containing offices, a small chapel, and a large garage with several hearses. Whilst I assume bodies are prepared there, etc. there are no burials. The story. I had a very hard day at work, and have been under a lot of stress. It was a Friday night, fairly late, and I eventually decided to go to bed. I had a lot of trouble sleeping, as my mind was working 100 miles per hour. You know the feeling. I simply couldn't turn it off. After staring at the ceiling for an hour, I became frustrated, and finally, I thought I'd open my mind and try to meditate. It was an effort, but after almost half an hour of this, I drifted off. Shortly after, I had an odd feeling, and I woke up and opened my eyes. I immediately noticed a web of white mist floating above me. This network of yellow-white colored mist was basically sort of like a spider web about a meter above my bed, and almost stretching across the entire room. Actually, the whole room was a bit foggy in general. I blinked, and then did a I don't think so double take, and rubbed my eyes. No sleep paralysis this time. It was still there. I tried to focus my eyes on it, and it was not easy. But what I saw was what I thought were transparent faces, outlined in the mist. The effect was very like the outline of an invisible person in smoke. One moved through on my right side and looked directly at me. The fear started to hit me now, but I tried to calm myself down and think rationally. Just hold on here. I might be seeing things just because I'm so tired and stressed, and I've just woken up too. I forced myself to be distracted and take my attention away. I shifted position in bed, closed my eyes, rubbed them, blinked them several times, and looked over at my clock radio. It was about 1:10, I think. Then looked back up, and it was still there. I then started to feel a slight vibration in my bed. Not a strong one, just like you'd feel the ground at a station as a train went past. I remember thinking, what the? And thought at first it was just my body shivering because I was cold or I had a muscle twitch. My attention on this now, I flexed my muscles a few times and then tried to hold still and feel it was still there. The bed was definitely vibrating, even a bit more pronounced now. I was getting quite frightened and not knowing what else to do, short of running out of the bedroom. I began to recite a prayer softly and also verbalize what I wanted any spirits to leave the place. Basically anything that came to mind, just in case I wasn't imagining things. After about a minute of this, it faded. After a while, I wanted to go back to sleep, as I was super tired, but every minute or so, I was worried it was still there, so I snapped my eyes open to check. It had gone. A few minutes after that, I fell asleep again, with no more events that night. Now after the event, when I think about it, I wonder if it was just my imagination or something else. What surprised and concerned me is that I felt very lucid. I felt quite clear-headed. The only other event which is vaguely similar, which I dismissed at the time, was about a year ago when I woke up in the early hours of the morning to see a similar face above and to the left of my bed, no mist, looking at me. I rather sheepishly recall in the shock yelling and then punching it. Honestly, who punches a ghost? Seemed to work though. The action either jolted me out of my sleep hallucination or made whatever it was go away. I'm not sure what to make of the above event, to be honest. As a general comment in my apartment itself, I don't typically feel anything strange or a presence, and other than this, there have been no odd things going on. Plenty of unusual sounds, mind you, but I'm fairly sure these come mostly from the neighbors, etc. Usually from what I read about hauntings, they tend to be more or less repetitive, and don't just hit you like that and go away. So I'm still not 100% convinced it wasn't a half dream. But still, what a freak out. I now believe that I officially have a poltergeist in my home. At first, my live-in boyfriend thought I was nuts. Now, he believes it too. The first day I moved in, I was doing laundry in the basement. My cats both began acting strangely and circled me whenever I was in the basement. I thought they were just hungry and trying to get my attention. But when I waited out to go upstairs, I had this terrible feeling that someone was standing behind me, staring right through me. The 12-year-old inside me told me to run up the stairs like I did when I was a kid, and I did. Then, one day, I was looking for my favorite tank top. I couldn't find it anywhere, and could swear that I brought it to this new house. I dismissed it as having it left somewhere. The third day we lived in this house, I broke my ankle playing softball. I ended up having to sleep on the couch in the living room. Throughout my 2-month stay on the sofa, I could swear I heard someone going up and down the basement steps, cold breezes, etc. I just thought that the pain medication was kicking in, and that my mind was playing tricks on me. After I could walk again, and venture into the basement to do the laundry, I still had the same feeling that someone was standing behind me and staring at me. One night, I was getting ready to fall asleep in the bedroom when my boyfriend was out of town fishing. I had both dogs in the room, one on the bed, and the cats too, and the dog on the floor next to the bed. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud thump, like a book had just fallen off a bookshelf and onto the hardwood floor. Well, I don't have any bookshelves in the bedroom, nor was anything on the floor, except for clothes, when I turned the light on. Just this last week, I came home to discover the bed neatly made, pillows stacked just so, and the blankets pulled up neatly and turned down. When I thanked my boyfriend for making the bed, he just stared at me. He said, "What are you talking about?" And I said that I didn't know what got into him to make the bed so nice, but it was a nice thing to do. He said though that I came home on my lunch hour and made the bed. He had been gone all day and didn't come home until I was already home. The basement lights continually go on and off. The light switches don't work, and the light bulbs are new. The circuits have been checked and everything is fine. I never know when they will work. The other night, the toilet handle in the bathroom jiggled for 10 minutes straight, at 3 a.m., and we both heard it. The night before last, my boyfriend witnessed a light come on in the hallway outside our bedroom and had heard the light switch flip. The light faded, and later when he got up to go to the bathroom, the kitchen light was on, which had been off when we went to bed. Last night, I saw a light come into our bedroom from the hallway and then fade. I also heard a very loud thump at the foot of my bed. When I got up, only my tennis shoes were in the floor, hardwood floor, and nothing else had fallen off or was out of place. It was so loud, I physically jumped when I heard it. My boyfriend was sound asleep. I am convinced that someone or something is totally screwing with me. Hi there! I know you. You're the person who watched my video. Can you please like, share if you're new, and subscribe? Well, even if you're old, share anyway. Not biologically old, but if you've been on the channel for a while. Okay, I'll shut up. Guys, love you guys, and I hope you enjoy this video.